I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1871 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. In this episode, I'm going to feature the story of another tremendous representative of the great Vietnam veteran generation, one as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from its country. This Vietnam veteran is Gene McCandless. He's from San Francisco, California. He spent 4 years in the U.S. Marines from 1967 to 1971. Recently, he did an interview with TogetherWeServed.com, a secure online community with the membership of over 2 million active duty and veteran members. I'm going to share portions of that interview with you, primarily the part that describes how he got into the Marines and then how that experience affected his life. I do this because many times after the Vietnam War, I would seethe in anger as I heard people talk about Vietnam veterans as a bunch of losers, people who live under bridges, nothing but a bunch of drunks and drug abusers. You know how you feel when someone tells you a lie? That's the way I would feel. That's why I spend all this time talking about these wonderful people who served in the Vietnam War. There's no doubt in the ensuing 50 years after the Vietnam War, the vast majority of these veterans have gone on to prove and verify the fact that their generation of veterans is as great as any that ever did heed the call of duty from our country. That's what I'm doing here, setting the record straight. When you hear the story of Gene McCandless of San Francisco, California, I'm sure you will agree that he is an excellent representative of that wonderful group of people who went to serve their country in Vietnam. In Gene's case, he came back home to San Francisco and served a career working as an electric crew foreman for the Pacific Gas and Electric Company based in San Francisco. And I'll guarantee you, he did a much better job because of his experiences in Vietnam and the Marine Corps. When the Vietnam veterans came home from over there, they were older, wiser, stronger, and better able to deal with adversities than their non-Vietnam veteran contemporaries. Gene McCandless has helped me prove that declaration that I often make. Again, I'm going to share portions of this interview that he did with Together We Served, primarily to show what motivated him to go into the Marines, and then to talk a little bit about how it affected his life afterwards. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what he did over there in Vietnam with the Marines, because all you have to know is that when he left the service in 1971, he was a sergeant. You don't just automatically get promoted to sergeant in the Marine Corps. You have to do something to earn it, and that's what Gene McCandless did. That's all you need to know. The parts of this story I'm going to share with you appeared in the Stars and Stripes Japan edition. The title of the overall story is Service Recollections. Veteran recalls time in Vietnam War as a 17-year-old Marine. The age factor of this veteran is significant because it resulted in him going to Vietnam twice in the same tour. The first question in this interview of Sergeant Gene McCandless is, please describe who or what influenced your decision to join the Marine Corps. I am quoting here Gene McCandless. Growing up in San Francisco, you would not think there was a neighborhood youth that wanted to join the Corps. This was not the case with our lads. With the untimely passing of my mother when I was 16 years old, I followed the other older friends into the Corps. With a father in the Merchant Marine in World War II, uncle in the Korean War, and a grandfather in World War I, it seemed the right way to follow JFK's clarion call to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I sought out my missing in action and responsibility father to sign my paperwork and joined on my 17th birthday. School would have to wait. Platoon 1053 at MCRD San Diego awaited me in August of 1967. Graduation from boot camp in October of 1967 found 95% of us with Westpac Ground Forces order for February 1968. Staging school battalion for my 1833 MOS as an Amtrak crewman in December 1967. There I met my lifelong friends, two good old boys from Mississippi, Ray Morris and William Woolfolk. We went through school and on to staging battalion also at Camp Pendleton. An aside here. I always found it interesting in the military how you could develop friends with people from totally different backgrounds, totally different areas, and totally different races. They become your best friends because you met them in the military. And that's what Gene McCandless did with those two young guys from Mississippi. At the staging battalion, they called the 17-year-olds out because regulations allowed only 18-year-olds and older to go to Vietnam. This was due to high-profile incidents where 17-year-olds were killed in Vietnam, and the stories in the press were not putting the Corps in a good light. I was put on a working party with other age-deficient Marines. At the end of the day, I simply returned to my group and nothing further said. I did not want to be left behind, and I was happy to blend back in. Apparently, he was able to sneak back in with his unit, despite the fact he was underage. February 14, 1968, on Valentine's Day, found us on a flight to Okinawa for the 3-day layover, then down south to Da Nang. After arrival at the transit center in Da Nang, we processed to our units. I was assigned to the 1st Amtrak Battalion at Cuvette, which meant a flight to Dong Ha. The C-130 landed very close by. It offloaded a number of body bags containing fallen Marines from up north, which brought the reality of war on a visual scale. Here he describes what happened when they flew to Dong Ha. For your information, Dong Ha is very near the DMZ. Anytime you got near the DMZ in Vietnam, you generally ran into some unpleasant resistance. He continued, "We flew up to Dong Ha, but were unable to land due to heavy ground fire and artillery incoming on the airstrip. I spent a fitful night as a transient nearby a 175 artillery battery that came with H&I intervals and fire missions. The next day, we again flew in a C-130 to a quick landing at the tarmac. With the ramp down and our sea bags thrown ahead of us, we, about 7 replacement Marines, exited a taxiing aircraft that took off soon after due to incoming possibilities." Did you get that? They didn't even stop the aircraft so they could get off. It just did a slow roll and they jumped off. That tells you how tough things were up at Dong Ha. Aircraft at Dong Ha and Khe Sanh during this time was prized targets by the NVA arty spotters and therefore moved on quickly. The transit center there was an eye-opener as rotating Marines from Khe Sanh were passing through to go to Phu Bai and rotation home. I was in awe and a bit frightened by these red dust-covered, battle-hardened Marines. I had a long talk with one. He was very modest and pleased to be going home. The NVA 782 gear he sported with that NVA belt buckle told me all I suspected as I wondered what this rail-thin young Marine's mother was going to think when he finally arrived home, gaunt and tired. I'll tell you what, I'll guarantee you his mother was overjoyed when he got home. Down to the boat ramp at Dong Ha, by this time alone as the others caught rides to their respective battalions, I asked for a ride aboard a USN Mike boat heading upriver. In the middle of the Chu Viet River, some miles upstream from Dong Ha. There was a Mike boat upside down with the hull sticking out of the water. The Navy crewman, when asked, told me it had hit a large water mine placed in the traffic area. I slid below the gunwale that afforded protection as some of the grunts aboard reacted to some stray small arms fire. I noted their professional composure and fire discipline as they surveyed the area looking for targets. Having no weapon of my own and just a sea bag, I felt totally inept, not even having a K-bar to use. Arrival at Chu Viet check-in, I was sent to Bravo Company 4th Platoon. While doing the check-in, we were warned of 152 millimeter artillery from the NVA that could come in at any time. Sure enough, not long after that, a barrage welcomed our small group of replacements, and a sprint to the bunkers was in order. After a suitable period of all clear, we again resumed our check-in. The armory stop found their hooch had been hit, and the armors were busy clearing up the mess that round had dealt their hut. I finally received a rifle at the armory from the pile and did a quick FAM fire into a sand-filled 55-gallon drum to ensure it worked. An old flak jacket and a few magazines were also given. No helmets were available. But soon thereafter, I was given one from a recent casualty. The headband was broken from where he had fallen, so a new one was provided. More artillery came later in the day, and bunker crawling ensued. By now, I was a bit rattled, as you might imagine. I was called to the perimeter to watch that evening. I did not know what to expect. I was soon finding myself in the Bravo Company office, where my age was recognized and told to report to the bunker for the evening. I was to be off in the morning to Phu and to the 3rd Marine Division headquarters. Down the scary river again, once more without a weapon, as it was checked back into the armory that morning. The flight from Dong Ha to Phu was aboard a small tail-dragger aircraft, as any means of transport were used on a first available basis. A very polite captain gave me orders to Okinawa and said I could return when I was 18. C-132 Okinawa, where a number of grunts from the 1st to the 27th were also staged. They were on the float from Hawaii when their BLT-127 was sent ashore during the Tet Offensive. Their 17-year-olds were corralled and sent back to Okinawa to await their birth dates as well. It seems like the Marines were very sensitive about 17-year-olds in combat. Continuing, we were all put into the Force Service Reserve and supply duty to help with getting materials down south to Vietnam. As each Marine's birthday came up, they were issued orders to join their battalion back in Vietnam. Over a number of days and months, they all received orders on their birthdays to head back down south. Unfortunately, we were able to see the casualty list in the Stars and Stripes and noted a number of those fine Marines in the coming months. The youngest of these was me. All of them were gone but me. All the while in Okinawa, I felt the deepest sense of guilt for leaving Vietnam, and it hung with me all of my days there as I awaited my hopeful orders to return to Vietnam. It seemed the longest time, months, since the last of the 1st to the 27th Marines had obtained their 18th birthday and had left for their unit in Vietnam. All the while, my fellow Marines kept telling me that I was stuck there for the duration of my 13-month tour. This was dismaying to me, and I longed to be free to go. Lo and behold, in the days before computers, my orders south came in on my birthday. I soon found myself flying back down to Da Nang with orders to, above all things, 1st Battalion, 27th Marines. Since I had an Amtrak MOS, I politely asked the corporal at the transit center if I could go to the 3rd Amtraks, now that I was in the 1st Marine Division. It was fine with me and made sense, so off I went to the Marble Mountain area south of Da Nang to report to the Amtrak Battalion. Not nearly as exciting as my trip upriver to Chu Viet, but I arrived at battalion headquarters and asked for assignment to Bravo Company and the 4th Platoon, where my good Mississippi friends were. It was grand to be back in the company. I was the long-lost prodigal son who returned to duty. He, in fact, returned to duty and did a good job with his Mississippi buddies. You can tell that because he was promoted to sergeant before it was all over with. You can see Gene McCandless was determined to serve in Vietnam with his Marine buddies. He was asked another question: what professional achievements are you most proud of from your military career? This is how Gene answered that question. I quote, "Obtaining the rank of sergeant at only 19 years of age. Having the discipline and work ethic that was required to be a good Marine carries over into my journeyman career as an electric lineman. With the focus on following the safety rules and directing those in my charge to do as well, may never have won me a popularity contest, but it ensured that we, as in an old Marine Corps saying, went out intact and did not come back tacked in. These structured leadership qualities paid off through the years. Younger linemen would be grateful for having been under stricter guidelines requiring work in a craftsmanship manner with due diligence to safety. I thank the Corps for fomenting those virtues in me." Another question he was asked was, what profession did you follow after your military service? He retired in September of 2018 after 44 years as an electric crew foreman at Pacific Gas and Electric Company in San Francisco. Here is a key question he was asked. In what ways has serving in the military influenced the way you have approached your life and your career? What do you miss most about your time in the service? This is how Gene answered those two questions. The influence, leadership, and obligations obtained in the service years have formulated a lifelong manner of social responsibility. Lifelong learning has been vital while in the service and beyond. In the service years, you had to be 21 years old to vote. You could carry 300 rounds of ammo, blocks of C4 explosive, and decide how to blow a bridge if you deemed it warranted, but could not vote. Since I turned of voting age, I have been diligent in taking this responsibility very seriously, being an informed citizen and preaching the merits of this to junior generations. He also said that he missed the camaraderie of fellow young people in our military days. He also said this when asked, based on your experiences, what advice would you give to those who have recently joined the Marine Corps? Gene said this: fulfill your obligations to the Corps to the best of your abilities. Embrace the regimented life for what it is, as it will be fundamental in your working careers. Take advantage of any training or educational opportunities. Save your money and invest wisely for retirement, even if it seems very far away. Cherish the friendship of your fellow Marines and make it a duty to stay in touch. The older you get, the more valuable these friends mean to you, since you shared good and bad times together. Those are some of the comments of U.S. Marine Gene McCandless of San Francisco, California. You can see he went through some rough times in the Marine Corps, but it made him a better man. It also encouraged him to share the lessons he'd learned in the Marines with the people he worked with at the Pacific Gas and Electric Company in San Francisco. Gene McCandless, you are in fact a tremendous representative of the great Vietnam veteran generation. We thank you very much for your service to your country while in the Marine Corps and also in your career with the Pacific Gas and Electric Company. I take this opportunity to issue you an official Vietnam Veteran News podcast salute for your service to your country. You did a very good job, and we wish you the best. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1871 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to listen to more stories coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?